I was 13 and I was molested. I got pregnant. The social worker came over and she had my grandmother to sign a consent form. The welfare department had told my grandmother that if she didn't sign those papers, she would not receive supplement foods. My grandmother signed an X, and when they took my son, they sterilized me at the same time. Normally, now I'm thinking, I'm trying to ask myself, why didn't they wait since my body was so young, and my body wasn't really ready to have a baby. My body was already traumatized from the delivery or from the rape. They didn't even say anything to me about this. My grandmother didn't understand what she was signing an X to because my grandmother was illiterate. I was raped twice. I was raped by the perpetrator, and I was also raped by the state of North Carolina because they took something from me. I didn't know I was sterilized until I had turned 19 after I had gotten married. The doctor actually explained to me, "You've been butchered." They said that I was feeble-minded. I'm not feeble-minded.
What's the official reason?
That was the official reason for having me sterilized. What I believe it was because I was Black. I was from a poor environment, and they probably felt like I was going to end up just like other people. I mean, what kind of government is this? I mean, I don't believe that this government allowed a group of people to sit there and say what was right for another person.
When the eugenics movement began in America, Americans thought of this as a very hopeful science. There wasn't much talk of sterilization. There was much attention, though, to better breeding. And so the word eugenics became very popular.
Eugenics at the time was understood to be a science. And given that this was a science, the Carnegie and Rockefeller philanthropies were interested in general in supporting the development of good science.
Andrew Carnegie gave money to 500 universities, colleges, and institutions. In all, he gave away over $200 million.
The list is long of those who, at the beginning of the 20th century, put their hopes in this new science coming straight from Europe. Towards the end of his life, Darwin became worried. A dark future awaited humanity, where in our civilization, the process of natural selection doesn't play a role. What's more, the renewing of our population is due more to the lower class rather than the middle or higher class. Galton, Darwin's cousin, created in 1883 the word eugenics, the science of genetic breeding.
When we say eugenics today, the word has a violent and pejorative connotation. We forget that at the turn of the century, the word eugenics had a positive connotation. Eugenic movements were well established. They developed with consent from governing powers. They were popular and recruited large numbers of doctors, hygienists, and city planners who were proud and honored to belong to such organizations.
From 1900, eugenic organizations multiplied in Europe. The first was created in Berlin in 1905 by the Dr. Plutz and a psychiatrist Rudin. It was the movement for racial hygiene. Racial hygiene was designed to prevent weakness, illness, disabilities, and for the unfit to reproduce.
There could be a fear of degeneration, a term that was used from the 1880s, which came from the vulgarization of Darwin's thinking and influenced by the observation of societies as if they were natural history objects.
Eugenics, with the fear of degeneration, without wanting to discredit the real concerns about global warming, but we can see the same type of overlapping between politics and science around a fear or a concern, and we announce a catastrophe.
The English Eugenics organization, presided over by one of Darwin's sons, was founded in 1907. The novelist H.G. Wells wrote that year, "Our duty is to inquire what this utopia will make of the infirm, the idiots, and the mad, the drunkards, the mean, and the stupid, too stupid to be of use to society. We need to resort to a type of surgery on society." It was in the United States that the first sterilization laws appeared in 1907. In 1910, close to New York, the Eugenics Record Office became the center for American eugenics research. The institution that emerged still exists today.
What is Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory now? One of the most distinguished laboratories for the pursuit of molecular biology and molecular genetics in the world.
I just want to film the former building of the Eugenics record office.
You know, it really has no connection to the laboratory today, and it wouldn't make sense to do that.
But it's an historical documentary. It's not about the present.
You know, I don't think that there'd be any discussion on the subject.
They are embarrassed by it. I think they should live more comfortably with it because it doesn't characterize Cold Spring Harbor today by any means. And they should say, this is what went on there, it was wrong, and we're now have gone past it now for more than half a century.
When the Eugenics Record Office was founded in 1910, it was meant to be a place where people studied families. Charles Davenport, who was the director, was focused, like his hero, Francis Galton, on family traits.
And they looked for families they called degenerate, right? So families where there was alcoholism, families where there was so-called feeble-mindedness, families where there was illegitimacy, families where there was prostitution and what have you. And then they would do interviews and ask about the parents and the grandparents.
But this was a pedigree chart of the famous Jukes family, and it got so large that they decided to make it in a circle because they could contain more people this way.
And why was it made?
It was made to show that some 900 individuals who ended up in the prisons of New York were descended from the same woman, Margaret, the mother of criminals. Harry Laughlin had projected that we needed to be 15 million Americans sterilized. In 1914, Laughlin was asked to write a model law, and Harry Laughlin said this law should be used to sterilize 10, perhaps 15 million people who represent the bottom tenth of the American population. Newspapers picked up that headline, people laughed. The reaction was strong against him. His plan was really to simply eliminate people who would cause social costs like crime and poverty. And he thought you could do that if you just didn't let people have children. When Virginia passed its sterilization law in 1924, there was a need to see whether it would be upheld by the courts of the United States. And so the doctors at the Virginia Colony for the Epileptic and the Feeble-Minded, an institution near Lynchburg, Virginia, chose a young lady named Carrie Buck as the first person to be sterilized. I met her in 1983, and she told me how she had been falsely accused of being promiscuous, of being an unfit mother, of being a moral degenerate.
When we asked to film the former institution where Carrie Buck found herself, we were told that most of the building no longer existed. But in going to see it ourselves, it seems that the building is in fact still there.
The evidence was that Carrie's feeble-mindedness was inherited. This was determined by giving an IQ test to her mother, who also had been in the Virginia colony. She flunked, and to Carrie, who also failed it, and she had an illegitimate daughter named Vivian, who was then about 6 or 8 months old. And a nurse said that she seemed to be feeble-minded as well.
First it went to the Virginia Court of Appeals, and then it went to the United States Supreme Court.
The decision was rendered in 1927 by Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, Jr., who is regarded as one of the great progressive justices in the United States. And so he said, in the end, that 3 generations of imbeciles are enough. Carrie's mother, Carrie, and Vivian.
Carrie Buck was sterilized at the Lynchburg colony, and thousands of people were sterilized there after her. More than 8,000 people in Virginia were sterilized under the eugenics laws. More than 20,000 in California, and the rest of the United States, as many as 60,000 people were sterilized. It's always surprising to me how few people actually have heard this story. It's not something we're proud of in America.